Pay us what you owe. That's a slippery slope.
Why?
Because from everything that I've read, the WNBA has never turned a profit.
And you know, the women were out there making a statement. You know, they came out there with T-shirts that said, "Pay us what you owe us."
That's right. Right now, they're going through their collective bargaining right now for next year, and that includes, you know, TV, the jerseys, the merch, and all that other.
But they got a big TV deal that they just signed, a $2.2 billion TV deal. I do wonder what they're owed, though. I mean, because, you know, the shirt says "Pay us like you owe us." I was thinking that was that they shortened the Jay-Z line, "Pay us like you owe us." Well, no, that's not the same thing. Well, but "Pay us what you owe us." I wonder what they're owed.
I'm not sure.
I wonder.
Owe you insinuates that you have not been given something that you have earned. A futures contract is not owing you. A contract that you are currently negotiating is not owing you. They paid you what they owed you. This is how dumb the WNBA is, and I haven't seen anybody really talk about this.
I'm losing money, but you want to raise.
Right.
Something ain't adding up.
It's time to grow up, girls, like fast.
This is crazy, y'all. I got Shannon Sharp, Colin Cowherd, Dan from Outkick, Marcellus Wiley. Everybody's going in on this right now.
If you ignore last year's numbers and instead compare against 2023 to create a fake narrative about historic growth that doesn't exist. What makes this deception even more outrageous is that the game was held in Clark's home arena of Indianapolis, meaning this should have been the biggest celebration in WNBA history, but instead it became a disaster that ESPN desperately tried to spin as success through pure statistical manipulation. That casual fans were literally rejecting a WNBA showcase without their biggest star. This wasn't just a minor setback for the league. It was a complete economic meltdown that exposed exactly how dependent the entire WNBA has become on one 23-year-old player who has already missed 10 regular season games this year due to various injuries, making this her most injury-riddled campaign ever after. Basic economics here.
The WNBA players get 9.3% of the league revenue. NBA, NHL, NFL players get 50% of the revenue. The WNBA did lose $40 million in 2024.
See, that's crazy. You haven't turned no profits, son.
Now, I know that the league's been around for 20 years. I know that it's lost money for a very, very long time here. I know they're saying like $40 million in losses potential. Now, $200 million in revenue is the total. $40 million in losses. The immediate reaction is whenever you say pay us what you owe us, it's like you're not making any money, so what do we owe you? You owe us money.
The ESPN's statistical sleight of hand became even more obvious when you examine exactly how they crafted their misleading historic viewership narrative by cherry-picking data points that painted the rosiest possible picture while completely ignoring the massive decline that actually occurred. Instead of honestly reporting that All-Star viewership dropped by over 1 million people compared to 2024, ESPN's official social media accounts and press releases emphasized that the 2025 game was up 158% from 2023 when Clark was still playing college basketball, and the WNBA was essentially invisible to mainstream audiences. This wasn't an accident or oversight, it was a calculated decision to manipulate public perception by using the most favorable comparison possible while burying the truth about what happens when their marquee attraction isn't available, and the deception becomes even more transparent when you realize they've spent the entire season crediting Clark with driving unprecedented league growth, but suddenly pretended individual.
If I'm not mistaken, I might have saw something that said NBA players get 9% of NBA revenue. WNBA.
No,
revenue.
that's the WNBA. Get 9% of the revenue.
Let's get that up a little bit more. That's all.
I want them to keep doing this, but the guilt trip on the NBA every single year, when it's 27 years later and y'all in your best year still lost $40 million.
Good.
4-0.
God, in your best year, you lost 40.
Listen, NBA players make 50% of revenues. WNBA players make 9%. And now the merch sales are up 500% and attendance is up, 40%.
You will get a raise, and they will get a raise. That media rights deal will give them a raise. But you're not making NBA money. You're not, the highest paid salary, my gut calculation, I say gut calculation, but I've actually done the math. I think the max deal is going to be around $700,000 a year.
The problem don't matter when her absence caused a ratings disaster. The network also heavily promoted Friday Night's Skills Challenge and three-point contest numbers, which drew 1.3 million viewers and represented an 89% increase from last year, but they conveniently ignored crucial context that would have explained this bump had nothing to do with overall league health and everything to do with format changes and scheduling adjustments that typically boost viewership. The devastation that Clark's withdrawal caused goes far beyond television ratings and extends into every aspect of the WNBA's economic ecosystem, from ticket sales to merchandise revenue to corporate sponsorship value, creating a complete market collapse that ESPN's coverage tried desperately to hide from public view. The 48% ticket price drop from $121 to $64 wasn't just a minor market adjustment, it was a complete rejection of the product by consumers who had purchased tickets.
But in 26, they're going to go from getting $45 million annually for TV to $200 million annually.
Yay, there we go. Now we talking. Now we talking business.
But
pay us what you owe.
What are we doing? Again, they thought they'd wear those shirts and everybody be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And instead, the intelligent sports fans all collectively went, your league doesn't make a profit. What? That was the response. Your league makes no money and is subsidized by the NBA. What?
The sport got to survive on its own, or it won't be a sport. It will be a charity.
Oh my God, Marcellus Wiley out.
This is specifically to see Clark compete in her home market of Indianapolis, and this collapse happened within hours of her injury announcement, proving that casual fans have zero interest in WNBA basketball without their primary attraction. Social media was flooded with fans announcing they were canceling travel plans, selling tickets, and simply not watching the All-Star game because Clark wouldn't be participating, creating exactly the kind of fan boycott that ESPN's manipulated statistics were designed to minimize and hide from potential advertisers and corporate sponsors. The economic impact extended beyond just the All-Star game itself and affected every business in Indianapolis that had been counting on Clark-driven tourism revenue, from hotels and restaurants to retail establishments that had stocked up on Fever merchandise specifically for the weekend. And ESPN's coverage completely ignored this broader economic devastation while focusing only on carefully selected statistics that made the situation appear less catastrophic than it actually was. Even more damaging for the league's long-term prospects is how Clark's absence exposed the complete lack of drawing power among other WNBA stars, as players like Nafisa Collier, who scored,
to which 2026 goes from roughly $45 million to $200 million annually. This will result in essence the league making money overnight and losing $40 million to a net gain of $115 just alone in TV deals. Even if game tickets sold were to stop growing, the merch stopped selling, it will still be in the green.
Caitlin Clark's already rich. She made $11 million this year alone in endorsements off the court. So regardless of how these negotiations go, she's set. Nobody else is.
The media rights deals are insane. They're insane in the NBA. That's why the contracts are insane. Major League Baseball, all these regional sports networks paid these teams and paid up along with the national broadcast, and the Major League Baseball salaries are insane.
Scored a record-breaking 36 points and won All-Star MVP honors, couldn't generate even a fraction of the interest that Clark brings simply by existing, proving that the league's star-making machinery has completely failed to develop anyone else capable of driving mainstream audience engagement. The industry backlash against ESPN's statistical manipulation was swift and brutal, with respected journalists like Christine Brennan publicly questioning why the network's PR department continues to mislead followers, instead of honestly reporting about WNBA viewership trends and the obvious impact of individual star players on audience engagement. Brennan's direct tweet calling out ESPN for promoting historic viewership when the numbers actually represented a huge drop from last year became a viral moment that exposed the network's deceptive practices to a much wider audience than would have otherwise paid attention to. WNBA coverage controversies. Sports Business Journal reporter Austin Karp provided even more damage.
One thing about women support each other.
You know why we know they don't? That's why we're in the situation that we're in. Because if women supported each other, it would be more. That's the problem.
Okay.
The women ain't supporting the women in the WNBA.
Well, the math works out to $347,000 per player. That's the share of their profits. That's probably what they would have to pay up for them to make a profit. We actually looked at that earlier. It's $213,000 that the players ought to pay back to the league at this point. Now, that'd be a lot more when you consider how long they haven't turned a profit.
By documenting how the Caitlin Clark effect manifests itself in two ways. Anything with Clark gets massive numbers, and anything without Clark drops hard, citing the 36% all-star decline alongside similar drops in other events when she's absent, creating a comprehensive picture of league dependency that ESPN's manipulated coverage was specifically designed to obscure. When your own industry colleagues are publicly calling out your statistical integrity and questioning your journalistic standards, you've crossed a line from corporate messaging into outright deception, and the fact that multiple independent sports media professionals felt compelled to fact-check ESPN's official coverage reveals just how blatant and problematic the network's manipulation actually was. What makes ESPN's comparison to 2023 even more revealing is that it essentially admits the WNBA operates in two completely different eras, before Clark and after Clark, with entirely separate audience expectations and business realities that make direct comparisons meaningless unless you're trying to hide current problems. By using 2023 as their baseline instead of 2024, ESPN was implicitly acknowledging that the Clark era represents such a fundamental shift in WNBA popularity that normal year-over-year analysis doesn't apply, which creates a massive problem for their narrative about sustainable league growth that doesn't depend on one individual player. The before Clark era that ESPN used for comparison featured all-star games that regularly drew fewer than 1 million viewers and regular season games that often couldn't crack 500,000, making the 2024 explosion look even more dependent on individual star power than ESPN wants to admit to potential advertisers and corporate partners. This statistical manipulation also undermines ESPN's own previous coverage throughout the season, where they consistently credited Clark with driving record-breaking viewership and attendance figures, because if individual players don't matter enough to warrant honest year-over-year comparisons, then their entire narrative about Clark's impact becomes contradictory and unreliable. The CBA connection makes ESPN's ratings manipulation even more problematic because WNBA players are currently in the middle of crucial salary negotiations where television viewership numbers directly impact their leverage in demanding higher compensation from league ownership. The Pay Us What You Owe Us shirts that players wore during All-Star Weekend warm-ups were specifically designed to highlight the disconnect between growing league popularity and stagnant player salaries, but ESPN's attempt to hide the 36% ratings decline through statistical tricks actually undermines the players' negotiating position by creating false impressions about revenue, sustainability, and audience engagement. Players have been using ratings growth as their primary evidence for why they deserve significantly increased compensation, with stars like Clark and Nafisa Collier pointing to record-breaking viewership as proof that the league's value has exploded beyond current salary structures. But ESPN's manipulated coverage makes it impossible to have honest conversations about what that growth actually looks like when you remove Clark from the equation. The timing of ESPN's deception during active CBA negotiations creates additional ethical problems because the network's financial relationship with the WNBA means their coverage directly affects business decisions worth millions of dollars, and corporate sponsors who rely on accurate viewership data to evaluate their investments are being misled about actual audience trends and the volatility that comes with Clark dependency. The broader implications of ESPN's statistical manipulation extend far beyond just WNBA coverage and reveal fundamental problems with how corporate media handles sports properties they have financial stakes in, prioritizing narrative protection over journalistic integrity in ways that ultimately serve no one's long-term interests. When networks feel compelled to lie about basic viewership numbers during what should be celebratory events, it indicates deep concerns about league sustainability and growth trajectories that honest reporting would expose, creating an environment where corporate messaging is disguised as objective journalism and viewers can't trust the information they're receiving from supposedly authoritative sources. ESPN's decision to sacrifice credibility for short-term narrative protection suggests they're more interested in maintaining lucrative broadcasting partnerships than providing accurate sports coverage, which creates long-term damage to their reputation as a news organization and makes viewers increasingly skeptical about their coverage of any sport or league where they have business relationships. The fan response to ESPN's manipulation has been overwhelmingly negative, with social media users immediately recognizing and calling out the statistical tricks being used to hide Clark's impact, suggesting that audiences are becoming more sophisticated about media manipulation and less willing to accept corporate spin as legitimate reporting. This growing skepticism creates serious challenges for ESPN's future WNBA coverage, because once viewers stop trusting your statistics and analysis, it becomes much harder to build the loyal audiences that advertisers value and corporate partners expect, potentially creating a vicious cycle where declining credibility leads to declining viewership that makes their WNBA investment even less valuable. The most damaging long-term consequence may be how ESPN's deception contributes to the perception that women's sports coverage is inherently less trustworthy and more susceptible to corporate influence than men's sports journalism, undermining efforts to build serious mainstream credibility for leagues like the WNBA that desperately need objective analysis rather than promotional coverage disguised as news reporting. The international implications of ESPN's deceptive coverage extend beyond American sports media and affect how global audiences perceive both the WNBA and American sports journalism standards, as international broadcasters and media partners rely on ESPN's reporting to understand league health and growth trends when making their own investment decisions about women's basketball coverage. ESPN's manipulation creates ripple effects throughout the global sports media ecosystem because international partners who don't have direct access to American audience data trust ESPN's analysis when deciding whether to pursue broadcasting rights, sponsorship deals, or coverage partnerships, meaning the network's dishonesty potentially affects business decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars across multiple continents and media markets. The deception becomes even more problematic when you consider that the WNBA has been actively pursuing international expansion opportunities and global audience development, with Commissioner Kathy Engelbert frequently discussing plans for international games, overseas marketing initiatives, and partnerships with foreign broadcasters who need accurate audience data to evaluate the league's actual commercial viability rather than ESPN's manipulated version of success. What makes this particularly damaging is that international sports media professionals are often more sophisticated about American audience trends than ESPN assumes, meaning their deception is likely being noticed and discussed by global media executives who now have additional reasons to question the reliability of ESPN sports coverage and the actual health of American women's professional sports leagues. The corporate sponsorship implications of ESPN's statistical manipulation create additional layers of potential legal and financial liability because major brands that have signed